I'm Phyllis Haynes, and this is a program devoted to great thinkers, great exchange, thoughtful exploration. I want to share with you a conversation I had with the great professor, Dr. Russell Ackoff, who was in fact a colleague of Edward Deming.
You see, there are 5 types of content of the human mind: data, information, knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. It's a hierarchy. There's an old academic aphorism which says an ounce of information is worth a pound of data. An ounce of knowledge is worth a pound of information. An ounce of understanding is worth a pound of knowledge, and an ounce of wisdom is worth a pound of understanding. That makes an ounce of wisdom about 42,000 ounces of data, you see. The point is that data, information, knowledge, and understanding are all concerned with increasing our efficiency. How can we more effectively get what we want? Wisdom is concerned with effectiveness. And it's only fairly recently we've come to understand the difference between them. We used to use them synonymously. The best distinction I'm aware of is one that was made by Peter Drucker when he said there's a difference between doing things right and doing the right thing. See, doing the right thing is wisdom, effectiveness. Doing things right is efficiency. Now the curious thing is, the righter you do the wrong thing, the wronger you become. If you're doing the wrong thing and you make a mistake and correct it, you become wronger. So it's better to do the right thing wrong than the wrong thing right. See? So we're now questioning. It turns out that almost every major social problem confronting us today is a consequence of trying to do the wrong things righter. So instead of looking at the efficiency with which we're pursuing our objectives, we're beginning to re-examine the objectives. Would you like an example?
Oh, I'm mesmerized. Go right ahead.
Well, take the healthcare system. As you know, it's been deteriorating terribly. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have universal coverage. We've got 42 million people uncovered. We are not the best healthcare system in the world, despite the politicians. According to the World Health Organization, we rank 37th, not number 1. Furthermore, we spend 3 times as much per capita, even though we don't cover everybody, as number 1. There's something is fundamentally wrong. And what's wrong is we never had a healthcare system. That's a misnomer. What do you pay a doctor or a hospital for? We're taking care of you when you're sick or disabled. It's a disability and sickness care system, not a healthcare system. Somebody said, aren't they the same thing? Well, of course not. What's the worst thing that can happen to somebody who depends on his income on the treatment of sickness and disability? See, if everybody were healthy, it would destroy the system. That can't be a healthcare system. If we wanted a healthcare system, you would have to pay a doctor for keeping you healthy. You would pay him a fee, and he would then pay all your medical expenses. Now, it's in his interest to keep you healthy, not to keep you sick. There was a recent study done by the federal government which showed that over 1 million people a year are seriously infected while in the hospital, and over 100,000 of them die. There's a lot of surgery that's unnecessary, we know that, and testing is just abominable, use of MRI and other stuff. It's all because the system is trying to survive by maintaining sickness and disability. And it does.
So this is an example that you're giving as to our change in inquiry. We're going to look at a different objective in healthcare.
We begin to look at what is actually the objective as opposed to what is proclaimed. It's the difference between what's practiced and what's preached. For example, another example, education, which is deteriorating. We're the only country in the world with increasing illiteracy. Our performance compared to other countries is terrible. And the reason is that our system is not about learning, which is what education is supposed to be about. It's about teaching. And we don't recognize that teaching is a major obstruction to learning. So you learn your first language, nobody taught it to you. But who ever learned a second language in school as well as they know their first language? You don't. It's estimated that 95% of what you use in your everyday work as an adult, you learned at work, not in school. Most of that it turns out to be a waste. But those who have taught learn something very fundamental. Who in a classroom learns the most? The teacher. See, schools are upside down. The way students should learn is by teaching others, not by being taught. Now, there are schools which have been designed that way, and they're remarkable. The faculty are now a resource available to the students who have to teach other students, and they learn by teaching, not by being taught. It's an entirely different concept of education. And you can take each system, you know, your health, welfare, and so on, and you find out that they're all pursuing objectives which are contrary to their intention. So it's not a matter of efficiency, it's a matter of effectiveness.
I wasn't planning on asking a philosophical question, but given the power of your first answer, I need to ask you this question. Since you have this wisdom and this insight that strikes me as quite powerful, what is the reason that it isn't the predominant force, or will this kind of thinking be the predominant force?
That's a very good question. It goes back to something very simple, becomes complex quickly. You never learn by doing something right, because you're already doing it right. You only learn from mistakes, okay? Now, there are two kinds of mistakes. One is when you do something you shouldn't have done. A company bought another company it shouldn't have bought. Eastman Kodak bought Sterling Drug. It turned out to be a serious mistake, and they had to get rid of it, for example. That's called an error of commission. There's other type of errors when you didn't do something you should have done. Eastman Kodak didn't buy Xerox when they could have. That would turn out to be a serious mistake. Now, it turns out that errors of omission are much more important than errors of commission. If you look at companies, organizations, and countries that fail, it's because of what they didn't do, not because of what they did. But now, if you look at the accounting system we use, public and private, they only record the cost of errors of commission. When you don't do something, it never appears in the books. So if you try to find out what it cost Eastman Kodak not to buy Xerox, you can't find out. If you want to find out how much it cost them to buy Sterling Drug, which they bought, you can find out. All right, now you're in an organization that says making a mistake is a bad thing, and you're a manager. So you want to keep your job and maintain stability. You don't want to make a mistake. But what kind of mistake? The only kind they record. Doing something you shouldn't have done. Now, how do you minimize the chance of doing something you shouldn't have done?
By doing nothing?
You got it. That's the answer to your question. It's our treatment of error that leads to a stability which prevents significant change. We have to start to recognize the importance of errors of omission, record and correct those errors when they're made, and that requires a whole new way of thinking.
Let's look at some omissions. I think that's a good place. I mean, I'm tempted to stay on the outline of restructuring the corporation. We can come back to that, recreating the corporation. I'd like to find out what grand omissions. You've mentioned education, we've discussed healthcare. Let's go deeper into some omissions that you see.
Well, you can do it either at the corporate or at the national level. At the national level, the principal thing we're not doing is facing the central problem confronting the world, which is the maldistribution of wealth, standard of living, and quality of life. And we're not facing that problem. And the failure to face that problem produces the unrest as one of the central causes of the mess we're in today. We consume such a huge portion of the total resources of the world and redistribute only a very small portion of it. So we're seen outside as avaricious and miserly and so on, all of which is so. We have a wonderful life, but at the cost of others. A doctor called me yesterday, a friend of mine from Washington, and he was very upset. He said that we have now reached 4 deaths in anthrax, 14 known cases. He said, do you know there were over 10,000 children that died this morning of starvation? How come that's not in the papers? omission. It's an imbalance. Now, that doesn't mean anthrax isn't a problem. Of course it's a problem. But in a sense, it's trivial compared to the problem of starvation and lack of food around the world. We're not doing very much about that.
It started with the original care package, and millions more like it. Passed from hand to hand, across land and sea, to help survivors in the aftermath of war. As we grew, we found better ways to help those in need. Ways to make a real difference, not just today, but tomorrow as well. Be the difference in people's lives. Help deliver lasting change at care.org.
Liv Wright is an extraordinary actress and thinker, writer. She has the creator of a new blog called The Wise Boudoir.
For boomers. And about a decade ago, I became interested in intimacy, period. I was interested in it because there was something in it that I knew held promise in some way. Didn't know about the science behind it at the time. Didn't know that there's real research about the more intimacy we have in our lives, the healthier and happier we are. Didn't know that. But I suspected there was something about it. Do you remember our friend, good old Bob Schwartz, up at Tarrytown Conference Center? I'll never forget, I was in one of his classes, and there were two authors. This was back in the 80s at some point. And the authors had a book called The Language of the Heart. And what they talked about was that this optimum state of mom nursing her baby, looking at the baby in the baby's eyes, this primordial stare the two of them do, baby and mom, is some kind of, I want to call it ideal or optimum moment for humankind. There's a way their blood pressures and their heartbeat synchronize, and they are in the human version of nirvana. I'll never forget that. And sure enough, by the time Pfizer and other pharmaceuticals began to explore this thing, they found there really is a connection between intimacy and lowering one's blood pressure. There is something, and the intimacy doesn't mean sex. It means what you have with your puppy, what you have with your infant, what you have with your garden. I live around the corner from a nursing home in Manhattan, and on the ground floor of the nursing home they put maybe a not quite floor to ceiling aquarium, so that people who are residents there can come sit and look at the aquarium and have their moment with the fish moving around. There's something about human beings and organic contact with organic forms of life that do something for us. I didn't know all this when I began exploring this, 10 years ago when I wrote the first essay. But I knew there was something about the self-protection that we learn as children that we need to discard as we get older. I know that. I knew that. So, because I'm a boomer.
Well, you mean letting go of barriers? It took a long time for some people to learn to put up barriers, but you're saying that the barriers need to come down.
It's bad for your health. It's bad for your health, your happiness, your well-being. The more accessible you are, the more engaged you are with life, the better it is for your blood pressure and your heart. So I wanted to write about that. I wanted to be a voice. I'm a storyteller. And I tell stories. Some of them I gather during the week. A friend talks to me, or I call a friend and say, what's new, what's going on. And next thing I know, I'm off with the Wise Boudoir. And I call it the Wise Boudoir because boudoir is seen as this place we go for we don't know. Sometimes there's mystery there. It's also a place to restore yourself, where women would go to, do their nose, to put on their outfits, to do whatever their little secret something is, to come out and then be intimate with the world. But I put wise in front of it because by the time we get to be over 50, we know things. We know things that are different from the things we knew when we were in our 20s and our 30s and so on. So I put that together because I want us to kind of hang out together with what have we learned, what we know about intimacy, what do we dare to do about intimacy as we get to be mature adults. So I'm loving it. And my readers, they use that word. They say, I love it. I have no idea what goes on with them privately as they read it, but most of the emails I get back say, I love this. And if it means that there is something that is intimate between us, between this writer and the reader, I'm happy for that. I don't even know, but the tone in which they write back to me says to me, we're doing something.
We have an age of isolation growing because of the nature of computers. Now, obviously, the social media is bringing us back into some sort of connection, but the neighbor coming next door and from next door and borrowing a cup of tea or sugar is gone. Is there a loss that we're experiencing, or is there some sort of rebirth in a different way?
Yeah, I'm concerned about that. One of the issues of Wise Boudoir quoted that song from the 60s sung by The Who, where the singer, I'm not sure whether it was Daltrey is The Who. I'm getting my people in Pete Townsend. I'm not sure who was the singer.
Daltrey, yeah.
But there was this anguished lyric he was singing, which is, heal me, touch me. There is something connected with being touched, that a warm hand on you, that there's just no substitute for. So I'm happy that we have social media. I'm happy that we are reaching out to each other in so many ways, creating community in so many ways. But I don't want us to overlook the old-fashioned thing of touching. There was, I think it was my father who said this to me. My father died a couple of years ago. He was 99. So he knows a lot of things, how the world changed and so on. But what he made me aware of is how much time we humans spent in the dark before we had all this stuff, before we had electricity and before we had a flickering fireplace, and people sat and heard each other breathe, some maybe only part of each other. So talk about intimacy, where you had to make up that with the rest of the human body, that the eye could only see a part, your cheek maybe, your nose maybe. But I had to put myself into a very deep place with you in order to really get who that body was on the other side of the fire. This isn't a person's lifetime. Not to say that he was around fire, but, you know, my dad was born in 1910. They were just beginning to illuminate homes at that time.
So let me see if I get this, because this is a very, very special thought. Because illumination in households did not occur widely, that people in their intimate moments were not necessarily seeing each other in the way we do now.
Hello.
Okay. All right.
Hello just means that I fill you out.
Okay.
And with my feeling, I fill you out with what I know about your soul.
Yeah.
I fill you out. I know, I can tell your voice does something to me that helps me make up what you must look like in the dark. I know you from the daytime, but, you know, it's my memory as a whole bunch of stuff, yeah? So when I think about touch, I think about not just physical, not just my hand, but empathy, what I do to create that relationship, you know, I have with you.
Suppose now shush, she makes the sound she makes to calm me down.
Hazen-Smith was a mentor to many, and I'm proud to say was my mentor. He is no longer with us, but his ideas are worth listening to. Please enjoy Albert Hazen-Smith.
I have a principle that I include in everything that I do in my work, which is use of time through use of ability. And it seems to me that the really important thing is to have methodology, to find out what an individual's abilities are. And in using those abilities, in other words, I'm agreeing with you, I simply turn it inside and say, if you have capabilities to be a scientist, and whatever that actually entails, enabling you to be that scientist is going to be the fulfillment of your purpose, your being, and the application of that ability to whatever subject matter you choose is going to be the benefit to all of us each and every time. And I think that's probably true in the way that we do our work and live our lives.
I was thinking about the non-universal education, the more specific education system of Europe and Japan, where people are selected.
Yes, we left that behind, and it's an issue about whether it was good or bad, I suppose. But we made a choice about that. And global actually means intensified, effective, local activity, local business with access through communications to resources in places that are remote. And
where power's going now? Power's going to nonprofit organizations and non-governmental organizations.
It's a fascinating discussion from many, many points of view. I guess we all want to take the multinationals to task from time to time about what they do and what they don't do. It's interesting. I feel very deeply about Juan's observations of what happens when there are these kinds of choices brought in, rather than something that might be considered valuable by him, perhaps by myself.
Coke is valuable, as I said, I enjoyed it.
Well, it's a very simple, hopefully very, very valuable concept. And it's that in every society there are ways in which people live their lives. And really taking the theme that Bob's brought forward very clearly, there is a past way that we've been organized and been living our lives. In most neighborhoods, for instance, if we take the American scenario and a New York neighborhood, in the past, it's very likely that 20 years ago, in a household, the mother would have been home all day, able to go shopping for goods and services, able to receive repairs, things like that. And the father of the household would have been away doing work, and the children away at school. In the current household arrangement, it turns out that both or all people in the family may very well be out all day long at places of work and business.
Here is what I'm asking.
Right.
What's going on?
And those merchants who are still operating in a way that presumes there is a local walk-by traffic, rather than changing to be able to deliver things answer phone requests for delivery of goods and services in time frames like 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. when we in fact are going home and are available for that. There's an important educational process in a business sense, I think, that has to be put into the consciousness of businesses. A lot of very beautiful people have very small businesses, neighborhood businesses, and their livelihoods are at stake. Yeah. And if they don't have a chance to understand this change, there will be a serious problem for them, and they will become indeed a serious problem for the society at large. If your refrigerator goes down on you, which God forbid none of our refrigerators should go down, that is not a problem that most appliance companies are ready to deal with, in the sense that when you call them, they would say, well, we'll give you a replacement refrigerator for the short term, so your eggs and your milk and your vegetables don't go sour on you, and then provide you with a means for getting the replacement refrigerator, and also, by the way, come and install it, and take away the old one. You've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how you're going to pay enough to get the guys to take that away, and also take the box away that the new one came in, and then supply you with service afterwards. Well, the company that begins to deal with the problem that is represented by any event and surrounds the problem with a solution set is going to become I don't think probably any of us, well, at least I don't know, of any appliance store that's ready to handle my issue. If my refrigerator goes down, mine did once, so I know that in a particular way. And likewise with your washing machine and any other thing that you can think of in your household or in your life. So my idea is that if we can provide a basic understanding about dealing with problems, wrapping ourselves around the problem, providing whole and complete services and supplies, then of course we're in a position to do something very wonderful to enhance the quality of life in a very fundamental way.
By sustaining these businesses. Very interesting. Very interesting.
If you have an idea for a program or someone you think really should be interviewed, please write to us and find us on Facebook, Haynes Media Works. Thank you. I know for me, being engaged in enlightened conversation, deep philosophical exchange, looking for possibilities, exploring the future, thinking about how we want our lives to be, that's the kind of conversation that I like to be engaged in, and it's conversation that I believe will attract humanity to the direction that will serve it.